1960s marked the golden era of American muscle, a time when carmakers battled fiercely on streets, strips, and speedways with one weapon: the mighty V8 engine. From high-revving small blocks to fire-breathing big blocks, this decade produced some of the most legendary power plants ever built, each leaving behind a legacy of speed, innovation, and raw performance. In this hour-long episode, we count down 15 of the greatest V8 engines that defined this unforgettable era. These are the engines that sparked the muscle car revolution, powered icons, and forever changed American automotive culture. Number 15. 1969 Chevrolet 427 ZL1 V8. When Chevrolet unveiled the ZL1 427 in 1969, it wasn't just releasing another big block V8, it was unleashing a factory-built monster that blurred the line between street car and race machine. At its core, the ZL1 was born out of necessity, designed for Chevrolet's drag racing and Can-Am programs that demanded lighter, stronger, and more powerful engines than what was available off the showroom floor. What made it revolutionary was its construction. Unlike the cast-iron 427s found in Corvettes and Camaros, the ZL1's block and heads were crafted from aluminum, cutting nearly 100 pounds from the front of the car. This reduction in weight gave cars equipped with the ZL1 sharper handling, better weight distribution, and a performance edge that few competitors could match. On paper, Chevrolet conservatively rated the ZL1 at 430 horsepower, but insiders and dyno tests told a very different story. With its high-lift camshaft, massive Holley 4-barrel carburetor, and free-breathing rectangular port heads, the engine's true output was closer to 500 horsepower in factory trim. In the hands of skilled tuners, that number could easily climb much higher, making the ZL1 a weapon both on the strip and on the street. The ZL1 story is inseparable from the COPO program, Chevrolet's central office production order system. Typically used for fleet vehicles or special corporate orders, the COPO system became a loophole for savvy dealers like Fred Gibb, who ordered 69 Camaros equipped with the ZL1 engine for racing homologation purposes. These cars weren't cheap. The engine alone cost over $4,000 at the time, nearly doubling the price of a base Camaro. As a result, many ZL1 Camaros sat unsold on dealer lots, misunderstood by casual buyers who balked at their cost, but revered today as some of the most valuable muscle cars ever built. Beyond the Camaro, the ZL1 occasionally found its way into Corvettes, but those were even rarer, ordered by insiders or racers who knew what they were getting. In essence, the ZL1 was Chevrolet's ultimate expression of the big block era, an engine built not for mass production, but for domination. The aluminum construction wasn't just about shedding pounds, it also dissipated heat faster, allowing for more aggressive tuning and durability under the punishing conditions of competition. Driving a ZL1-equipped Camaro was unlike piloting any other muscle car of the time. The idle was lumpy and aggressive, a constant reminder of the radical cam profile lurking under the hood. Throttle response was immediate and ferocious, and once the tachometer swept past 3,000 revolutions per minute, the engine roared with an intensity few street cars could match. Period tests recorded quarter-mile times in the low 13s on stock tires, and with slicks, these cars dipped deep into the 12s, astonishing performance for a factory-built car in 1969. The ZL1 also represented the peak of the horsepower wars that defined the 1960s. By the end of the decade, insurance companies, government regulators, and rising fuel concerns began to clamp down on big displacement engines. The ZL1, therefore, became both a high-water mark and a swan song for Chevrolet's unrestrained engineering. It was a statement that if you had the money, the connections, and the bravery, Chevrolet would sell you a race-ready engine in a street-legal package. Today, the legend of the ZL1 427 has only grown. With only 69 Camaros and a handful of Corvettes ever built, their rarity makes them million-dollar collectibles, but their reputation rests on more than scarcity. They symbolize the purest expression of muscle car philosophy: maximum power, minimal compromise, and engineering pushed to the absolute limit. The ZL1 wasn't meant for everyone, it was meant for those who wanted the fastest, most uncompromising car on the street or strip, and were willing to pay the price. In hindsight, the 1969 Chevrolet 427 ZL1 V8 wasn't just an engine. It was a declaration of intent, proof that Chevrolet was willing to do whatever it took to stay ahead in the muscle car wars. Even half a century later, enthusiasts still talk about it with a mix of awe and reverence, knowing that in the annals of American performance history, the ZL1 will always stand as one of the greatest V8s ever created. Number 14. 1969 Ford Boss 429 V8. The 1969 Ford Boss 429 was never meant to be just another muscle car engine. It was a weapon engineered for one purpose: NASCAR domination. Ford had already tasted victory with its FE series engines, but the stock car wars of the late 1960s demanded something even more extreme. Chrysler had its 426 Hemi tearing up the track, and to stay competitive, Ford had to respond with an equally radical design. The answer came in the form of the Boss 429, a semi-Hemi big block with cylinder heads so massive and ports so wide that the engine could breathe like no other in Ford's lineup. This engine wasn't born out of marketing flash, it was homologation in its purest form. To make it legal for NASCAR, Ford had to install a limited number into production cars. That car would be the Mustang, and specifically, a unique version known as the Boss 429 Mustang. Ford farmed out the work to CarCraft, a specialty shop in Brighton, Michigan, which modified Mustang bodies to fit the gargantuan new engine. The shock towers had to be reshaped, the engine bay widened, and countless other tweaks made just to shoehorn this hulking V8 under the hood. The end result was one of the most exotic Mustangs ever built, with only 859 produced in 1969 and a further 499 in 1970. On paper, the Boss 429 was rated at 375 horsepower, but this figure was as much about appeasing insurers and regulators as it was about truth. In reality, the massive semi-Hemi cylinder heads, oversized valves, and huge ports meant the engine could make well over 500 horsepower with only mild modifications. Even in stock trim, it had an intoxicating character, lazy and docile at low revs, but once the torque swept past 4,000 revolutions per minute, the engine came alive, pulling harder and harder as the revs climbed. The Boss 429 was built for high-speed endurance, and in NASCAR trim, it became a monster, proving Ford could stand toe-to-toe with Chrysler's Hemi on the super speedways. For the average street buyer, though, the Boss 429 Mustang was a strange beast. It was expensive, temperamental, and not particularly quick in everyday driving because the engine's radical airflow design was tuned for sustained high revolutions per minute racing, not stoplight sprints. Car magazines of the era noted that while it wasn't the quickest Mustang off the line, it felt like it had endless potential once it hit its stride. Buyers who were willing to invest in tuning quickly discovered that this engine could outmuscle almost anything else on the road once unleashed. The Boss 429 was also symbolic of Ford's willingness to go to extremes in the horsepower wars. While most manufacturers were focusing on cubic inches and compression ratios, Ford poured its resources into cutting-edge cylinder head technology. The semi-Hemi design wasn't a true hemispherical combustion chamber like Chrysler's, but it achieved a similar effect: massive airflow, efficient combustion, and astonishing top-end power. That engineering ambition cemented the Boss 429's place as one of the most exotic production V8s of the era. Collectors today revere the Boss 429 not only for its rarity but also for its sheer audacity. The fact that Ford went to such lengths to build a limited run of Mustangs simply to qualify an engine for NASCAR speaks volumes about the competitive spirit of the late 1960s. Each Boss 429 Mustang carries with it the DNA of a race car, from its specially braced engine bay to the enormous V8 that barely fit inside. The cars were hand-assembled, further adding to their mystique, and they remain some of the most sought-after Mustangs ever built. In hindsight, the 1969 Ford Boss 429 wasn't just an engine. It was a declaration that Ford would not be outdone in the racing arena, no matter the cost. It showcased the height of the muscle car era's excess, when manufacturers were willing to build road-going race engines simply to stay competitive on Sunday. Today, when enthusiasts hear the name Boss 429, they don't just think of horsepower, they think of a legend forged on the track, a street car born out of necessity, and one of the greatest V8 engines of the 1960s. Number 13. 1968 Ford 428 Cobra Jet V8. By the late 1960s, Ford knew it was losing ground in the muscle car wars. The Mustang had been a sales sensation since 1964, but when it came to raw street and drag strip performance, rivals like Chevrolet with its big block Camaros and Chrysler with its Hemis were stealing the spotlight. Ford's answer came in 1968 with the 428 Cobra Jet V8, a factory-built drag racing engine disguised as a street option. At its core, the Cobra Jet was born from Ford's FE Series big block family, which already included workhorses like the 390 and 428 Police Interceptor. But engineers and racers knew the standard 428 lacked the breathing ability to compete with Chrysler's Hemi or Chevrolet's 427. The Cobra Jet solved this problem by combining the sturdy 428 block with performance-oriented 427 low-riser heads, larger valves, a more aggressive camshaft, and a massive Holley 735 CFM 4-barrel carburetor. It was a clever part-spin special that transformed the Mustang into a fearsome drag strip contender. Officially, Ford rated the Cobra Jet at only 335 horsepower, a figure that raised eyebrows even in period. In reality, the engine easily made over 400 horsepower right off the showroom floor, with torque figures approaching 440 pound-foot. The underrated horsepower figure wasn't an accident. It was a calculated move to keep insurance premiums low and ensure the engine would be eligible in certain racing classes. For buyers, it was an incredible bargain. They got far more performance than the numbers suggested. The debut of the 428 Cobra Jet was one for the history books. In April of 1968, Ford sent a fleet of Cobra Jet-equipped Mustangs to the NHRA Winter Nationals in Pomona, California. The cars shocked the competition by dominating the Superstock class, leaving little doubt that Ford had a winner on its hands. Almost overnight, the Mustang regained its muscle car credibility, and the Cobra Jet badge became synonymous with street and strip dominance. Driving a Cobra Jet Mustang was an experience in contrast. Around town, the engine felt docile thanks to its mild compression ratio and hydraulic camshaft. But put your foot down, and the big block roared to life, delivering relentless torque that pinned drivers to their seats. With traction-limited bias-ply tires of the era, quarter-mile times dipped into the low 13-second range, making the Cobra Jet Mustang one of the fastest factory cars available in 1968. The Cobra Jet wasn't limited to Mustangs either. Ford installed it in Cougars, Fairlanes, Torinos, and even Mercury Cyclones, broadening its reach across multiple models. This gave enthusiasts several choices when ordering a Cobra Jet-powered car, whether they wanted the lightweight agility of a Mustang Fastback or the stealthy sleeper appeal of a mid-sized Torino. Regardless of the body, the engine transformed every model into a legitimate muscle machine. What made the 428 Cobra Jet especially beloved was its balance between accessibility and performance. Unlike exotic engines like Ford's Boss 429 or Chrysler's 426 Hemi, the Cobra Jet didn't require constant tuning or deep pockets to keep it running. It was tough, reliable, and could be driven daily without fuss. Yet with minimal effort, it could be tuned into a serious racing threat. For the average enthusiast, it was the perfect combination of practicality and power. Today, the Cobra Jet is remembered as the engine that saved Ford's muscle car reputation in the late 1960s. It provided the Mustang with the firepower to go head-to-head with rivals and reassert Ford's dominance at the drag strip. More importantly, it embodied the essence of the muscle car era: affordable speed, factory built for enthusiasts who wanted to rule the streets. In hindsight, the 1968 Ford 428 Cobra Jet wasn't just an engine option, it was a turning point. It showed that muscle cars didn't have to be exotic to be legendary. They just needed the right mix of raw power and smart engineering. The Cobra Jet's legacy continues today, not just in the collector car market, but in Ford's own modern drag racing Cobra Jet Mustangs, which trace their lineage directly back to this groundbreaking engine. Number 12. 1968 Chrysler 340 V8. In an era dominated by massive displacement big blocks, Chrysler surprised everyone in 1968 by introducing a small block that punched far above its weight, the 340 V8. At just 340 cubic inches, this engine was smaller than the 383, 426, and 440 Mopar powerhouses, but it quickly gained a reputation as one of the most formidable performers of the muscle car era. The 340 was Chrysler's answer for enthusiasts who wanted lightweight cars with explosive acceleration and razor-sharp handling, proving that brute cubic inches weren't the only path to dominance. The 340 was part of Chrysler's LA Series small block family, but it was far from a basic engine. Engineers designed it with performance in mind from the very beginning, giving it a high compression ratio, forged steel crankshaft, and special high-flow cylinder heads with larger ports and valves. A big Carter ABS 4-barrel carburetor fed the intake, while a hotter camshaft gave it an aggressive personality that came alive at higher revolutions per minute. Officially, Chrysler rated the 340 at 275 horsepower, but most enthusiasts and testers at the time knew the number was deliberately conservative. In reality, output was closer to 320 horsepower, and because the engine was installed in lighter A-body cars like the Dodge Dart and Plymouth Barracuda, the power-to-weight ratio gave them the ability to embarrass bigger, heavier muscle cars. What made the 340 truly special was the way it delivered its performance. Unlike many big blocks that relied on massive low-end torque, the 340 loved to rev. Its free-breathing heads and aggressive cam allowed it to pull hard past 5,000 revolutions per minute, rewarding drivers who kept their foot in it. This high-revving nature gave the 340-powered Mopars a lively, almost European sports car feel compared to the brute force approach of their larger siblings. Yet, thanks to its robust construction, the 340 could also handle serious abuse at the drag strip without complaint. The most famous homes for the 340 were the Dodge Dart GTS and the Plymouth Barracuda Formula S, both compact A-body cars that weighed hundreds of pounds less than mid-size muscle cars like the Chevelle or GTO. In these small and nimble platforms, the 340 gave drivers the advantage of quick reflexes and strong acceleration. Road tests of the day often reported quarter-mile times in the high 13-second range, figures that rivaled or even beat larger displacement competitors. For young enthusiasts, the 340 Mopars were a revelation. They were affordable, quick, and could hold their own against almost anything at the local drag strip. Beyond straight-line speed, the lighter 340 cars also offered better balance and handling than the nose-heavy big blocks. This made them a favorite among drivers who valued agility as much as acceleration. The engine was also remarkably durable, able to withstand hard use thanks to its forged internals and strong bottom end. As a result, the 340 developed a loyal following among grassroots racers who appreciated its combination of strength, speed, and affordability. The 340 also became an important part of Chrysler's marketing strategy during the muscle car boom. It allowed Mopar to offer performance versions of its smaller, less expensive cars without pricing them out of reach. While a Hemi Cuda was the dream car, it was financially out of reach for many buyers, and insurance premiums on big blocks were climbing rapidly by the late 1960s. The 340 was the perfect compromise: plenty of performance, lower insurance rates, and a car that could be driven daily without fuss. In hindsight, the Chrysler 340 represents a shift in the philosophy of muscle cars. It showed that balance and intelligent engineering could rival raw displacement, a lesson that would become increasingly important in the 70s as emissions regulations and rising fuel costs began to choke the muscle car market. Today, collectors and enthusiasts still speak of the 340 with respect, often calling it one of the most underrated engines of the golden era. Its combination of rev-happy character, durability, and real-world performance makes it a standout in Mopar history. The 1968 Chrysler 340 V8 may not have had the sheer mythic aura of the Hemi or the brute force of the 440, but it carved out its own legend by proving that smaller could be just as mighty. In the lightweight Darts and Barracudas it powered, the 340 became a giant killer, a compact storm in the golden age of muscle cars that punched far above its size and earned its rightful place among the greatest engines of the 1960s. Number 11. 1968 AMC 390 V8. By 1968, the American Motors Corporation knew it needed to break away from its reputation as the maker of economy cars and family runabouts. While the Big Three, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, were already knee-deep in the horsepower wars, AMC was still seen as a conservative player with little to offer the growing youth market. That all changed with the introduction of the AMC 390 V8, a bold move that gave the company a true muscle car engine and signaled its arrival in the performance arena. The 390 was part of AMC's brand new Gen 2 V8 family, an advanced design that replaced their older, heavier V8 engines. It displaced 390 cubic inches and featured a 4-barrel carburetor, high compression pistons, and a forged steel crankshaft. AMC rated it at 315 horsepower, but as with most engines of the era, the number was conservative. Real output was often closer to 340 horsepower, and with torque figures in the 425 pound-foot range, the 390 delivered strong acceleration that surprised many doubters. AMC wisely dropped the new 390 into its most exciting car to date, the AMX, a two-seat sports coupe introduced in 1968. Compact, lightweight, and aggressive in styling, the AMX was unlike anything AMC had built before. When combined with the 390, it became a legitimate challenger to Mustangs, Camaros, and even Corvettes. Road tests at the time praised the AMX's balance of handling and power, with quarter-mile times dipping into the low 14-second range, impressive numbers for a relatively small automaker entering the muscle car wars. The 390 wasn't exclusive to the AMX either. It was also available in the Javelin, AMC's new pony car, which gave buyers a stylish and affordable alternative to the Mustang and Camaro. With the 390 under its hood, the Javelin could hold its own in street battles and local drag strips across the country. The engine's broad torque curve made it flexible in everyday driving, while its top-end power made it a thrill when pushed hard. For a company not known for performance, the 390 was a revelation. One of the keys to the 390's success was AMC's decision to design it as a robust and durable engine. Unlike some of its competitors, which pushed high performance at the expense of longevity, the AMC 390 was built to last. Its forged internals and strong block construction meant it could take significant abuse, making it a favorite among grassroots racers. Many enthusiasts discovered that with a few modifications, better intake and exhaust systems, upgraded cams, the 390 could easily produce power well beyond factory ratings. The 390 also marked a cultural shift for AMC. For decades, the company had cultivated a reputation for practicality, appealing to families and older buyers. But by offering an engine like the 390 in youthful, stylish cars such as the AMX and Javelin, AMC sent a clear message. It was ready to play in the same league as the performance leaders. This bold move helped AMC attract a new generation of customers and carve out a niche in the increasingly competitive muscle car market. In terms of performance, heritage, the 390 helped AMC establish credibility on the racing circuit as well. With factory and dealer support, Javelins powered by the 390 began appearing in drag racing and SCCA Trans Am competitions, giving AMC valuable exposure against the more established brands. Although AMC didn't dominate outright, the fact that their cars could compete at all was a victory in itself. Looking back, the 1968 AMC 390 V8 is remembered not just for its horsepower, but for what it represented. It was AMC's declaration of independence from its conservative past, a statement that it could build engines and cars that stood proudly alongside those of Detroit's giants. In many ways, the 390 was AMC's golden ticket into the muscle car era, giving it both the street credibility and the racing presence it had long lacked. Today, collectors and enthusiasts still hold the AMC 390 in high regard. It may not have achieved the legendary status of the Hemi or the Cobra Jet, but it remains a symbol of AMC's daring spirit during the late 1960s. Compact, powerful, and surprisingly sophisticated, the 390 stands as proof that even the smallest of the American automakers could build an engine worthy of the muscle car's golden era. Number 10. 1968 Oldsmobile 455 Rocket V8. By 1968, Oldsmobile was ready to make a bold statement in the muscle car world. While its 442 had already gained a reputation as a refined yet potent performer, General Motors' internal corporate policy restricted intermediate cars to a maximum of 400 cubic inches. Oldsmobile, however, wanted more. The answer came with the legendary 455 Rocket V8, which debuted under special circumstances in the Hearst Olds and rewrote the rulebook for what an intermediate performance car could be. The 455 Rocket was an evolution of Oldsmobile's long line of Rocket V8s, engines that had carried the brand's performance image since the late 1940s. With a displacement of 455 cubic inches, it was one of the largest engines ever fitted to a GM muscle car. Its specifications were impressive: a 4-barrel carburetor, 10.5-to-1 compression ratio, and free-breathing cylinder heads helped it deliver a factory rating of 390 horsepower and a staggering 500 pound-feet of torque. But those numbers only told part of the story. On the road, the engine's effortless surge of power made even heavy Oldsmobile intermediates feel ferociously quick. Because of GM's 400 cubic inch limit, the 455 couldn't simply be dropped into the standard 442. Instead, Oldsmobile partnered with Hurst Performance, which had already built a reputation for high-performance modifications and aftermarket shifters. The collaboration birthed the 1968 Hurst Olds, a special limited production model that sidestepped the rules by being marketed as a specialty car rather than a factory Oldsmobile. With the 455 under its hood, the Hurst Olds instantly became one of the most powerful muscle cars of the late 60s. Period tests recorded quarter-mile times in the low 13-second range, placing it squarely among the quickest cars of its day. The beauty of the 455 Rocket lay not only in its raw numbers, but also in its character. Where some muscle car engines of the era were peaky or temperamental, the 455 delivered power with smoothness and refinement. Its torque curve was broad and immediate, allowing drivers to launch with authority from any revolutions per minute. This combination of brute force and sophistication was very much in line with Oldsmobile's image as GM's gentleman's performance brand. The Hurst Olds wasn't just fast, it was a muscle car that could cruise the highways with comfort while still outrunning almost anything it encountered. The 1968 Hurst Olds also benefited from unique styling touches that set it apart from ordinary 442s. Finished in a striking Peruvian silver with black stripes and accented with Hurst badging, it looked every bit the part of a specialty muscle machine. Inside, it carried Hurst's signature dual-gate his and hers shifter, which allowed drivers to choose between automatic ease and manual style control. With the 455 Rocket providing the muscle, it became an instant collectible and a rolling advertisement for Oldsmobile's engineering prowess. On the street, the 455's immense torque gave it an edge that few rivals could match. Even big block Chevelles and GTOs had trouble keeping up with the Hurst Olds once the light turned green. At the same time, the car's overall refinement made it appealing to an older, more affluent buyer who wanted a muscle car without sacrificing comfort and image. This dual nature of brute performance, wrapped in sophistication, made the 455 Rocket unique among muscle car engines. In retrospect, the 1968 Oldsmobile 455 Rocket V8 was more than just another big engine. It represented a turning point, showing that GM divisions were willing to bend the rules to satisfy performance-hungry buyers. The Hurst Olds partnership created a loophole that allowed Oldsmobile to unleash its biggest weapon in the muscle car wars. For enthusiasts, it delivered everything they wanted: massive torque, exhilarating acceleration, and exclusivity. Today, the 455 Rocket's legacy endures not only in the collector car market, but also in the way it demonstrated Oldsmobile's ability to blend brute strength with refinement. It proved that muscle cars didn't always have to be bare-knuckled bruisers. They could also be polished, stylish, and sophisticated, while still delivering staggering performance. The 1968 Oldsmobile 455 Rocket V8 remains a defining piece of the muscle car era. A bold, rule-breaking engine that gave Oldsmobile its place among the giants of Detroit's horsepower wars. Number 9. 1966 Chrysler 440 Magnum V8. When Chrysler introduced the 440 Magnum in 1966, it marked the arrival of an engine that would become the backbone of Mopar performance for years to come. Displacing a massive 440 cubic inches, this V8 represented Chrysler's largest wedge-head engine, and it quickly established itself as one of the most versatile and powerful big blocks of the muscle car era. While the legendary 426 Hemi grabbed headlines with its exotic hemispherical heads and racing pedigree, it was the 440 Magnum that gave Chrysler the ability to deliver tire-melting performance to the masses. The 440 was part of Chrysler's RB Series big block family, designed as a more practical and accessible alternative to the Hemi. It used conventional wedge-shaped combustion chambers, which made it less complex and easier to maintain while still delivering impressive airflow and combustion efficiency. In its Magnum form, the 440 was fitted with a 4-barrel carburetor, high-lift camshaft, free-flowing exhaust manifolds, and a 10.1-to-1 compression ratio. Officially rated at 375 horsepower and over 480 pound-feet of torque, the 440 was a torque monster, delivering massive low-end thrusts that made Mopar muscle cars feel unstoppable in everyday driving. The brilliance of the 440 Magnum was its usability. Where the 426 Hemi demanded high revs and careful tuning to unleash its full potential, the 440 provided accessible, effortless power right off idle. This made it perfect for real-world driving, where instant torque meant quick launches at stoplights, brutal acceleration in traffic, and a sensation of boundless strength underfoot. For enthusiasts who wanted Hemi-like performance without the price tag or maintenance headaches, the 440 Magnum was the perfect solution. The engine quickly spread across Chrysler's performance lineup. It became available in cars like the Dodge Charger, Plymouth GTX, Dodge Coronet RT, and later the iconic Plymouth Roadrunner. In all of these platforms, the 440 Magnum transformed already stylish machines into street bruisers capable of holding their own against anything Chevrolet or Ford had to offer. On the drag strip, the 440-powered Mopars consistently ran quarter-mile times in the mid-13s, impressive performance that rivaled much more expensive and exotic competitors. But the 440 wasn't just about straight-line performance. Its immense torque also made Chrysler's muscle cars excellent highway cruisers. With plenty of power in reserve, passing slower traffic was effortless, and long-distance trips could be devoured with ease. This blend of brute force and everyday drivability made the 440-equipped Mopars especially popular with buyers who wanted a car that could perform double duty, savage at the drag strip, yet comfortable on the open road. One of the most iconic applications of the 440 Magnum was in the 1967 Plymouth GTX, which was marketed as the gentleman's hot rod. With the 440 as its standard engine, the GTX embodied Chrysler's belief that muscle cars didn't have to be bare-bones machines. Buyers got performance and refinement in one package, and the engine's reputation for reliability made it even more appealing. Dodge followed suit with the Coronet RT, further cementing the 440's place as a cornerstone of Mopar's image. The impact of the 440 extended beyond just performance numbers. It gave Chrysler a competitive edge in the ongoing horsepower wars of the late 1960s. While other automakers focused heavily on peak horsepower bragging rights, Chrysler understood the value of torque, and the 440 delivered more of it than almost anything else on the market. For drivers, that meant effortless performance in any situation, a defining characteristic that made the 440 beloved by enthusiasts then and now. In retrospect, the 1966 Chrysler 440 Magnum V8 was a triumph of smart engineering and marketing. It may not have carried the mystique of the Hemi, but it was the engine that truly defined Mopar's muscle car dominance during the golden era. Accessible, reliable, and brutally effective, it gave Chrysler the perfect blend of power and practicality, ensuring that cars like the Charger, Roadrunner, and GTX would become legends in their own right. For many enthusiasts, the 440 Magnum remains the quintessential Mopar big block, a torque-rich powerhouse that delivered the thrill of the muscle car era to the widest audience. Number 8. 1965 Chevrolet 396 Turbo Jet V8. When Chevrolet introduced the 396 Turbo Jet V8 in 1965, it marked the dawn of a new chapter for the brand's performance image. Until that point, Chevrolet's muscle machines relied largely on small block engines, or the older W-Series big blocks, like the 348 and 409. But the arrival of the 396 cubic inch Mark IV big block brought an all-new design that would serve as the foundation for decades of Chevrolet performance dominance. The 396 wasn't just another large engine, it was the introduction of Chevrolet's Mark IV big block architecture, which would evolve into legends like the 427 and 454. With its canted valve heads, revised combustion chambers, and stronger bottom end, the 396 represented a leap forward in engineering. In its most potent, solid lifter version, introduced in the mid-year 1965 Chevelle Z16, it was rated at 375 horsepower and 420 pound-feet of torque. This made the Chevelle Z16 one of the most formidable muscle cars of its time, even if production was limited to just 200 cars. The 396 was also available in the Corvette in 1965, giving America's sports car a surge of big block power that transformed its personality. For Corvette buyers, the new engine meant explosive acceleration, a thunderous exhaust note, and a newfound reputation for brute strength to complement its sleek handling. It was a perfect marriage of raw power and refined engineering, showcasing Chevrolet's ability to deliver both sophistication and savagery in the same package. The 396's Turbo Jet branding wasn't just marketing hype, it reflected Chevrolet's effort to sell the engine as a new breed of performance power plant. With its large 4-barrel carburetor, high-flow intake, and aggressive camshaft profiles, the 396 was designed to breathe deep and rev harder than its predecessors. Road tests in the era showed that 396-equipped cars could run the quarter-mile in the mid to high 13-second range, an impressive figure that put them in the same league as Mopar Hemis and Ford's 427 FE. Perhaps the most important aspect of the 396 was the foundation it laid for Chevrolet's performance reputation in the latter half of the 1960s. The engine proved so successful that Chevrolet used it to establish its SS 396 branding across the Chevelle line, turning the midsize Chevrolet into a true street warrior. By 1966, the Chevelle SS 396 became an icon, and the 396 engine was at the heart of its appeal. Buyers could choose from multiple versions of the engine, ranging from a mild 325 horsepower street motor to the ferocious 375 horsepower solid lifter variant. What made the 396 so effective was not only its brute strength, but also its balance. It offered incredible torque off the line, but unlike some massive big blocks, it also had the willingness to rev, giving drivers the best of both worlds. It was equally at home smoking the tires on the drag strip or cruising comfortably on the highway. This dual nature made it a hit with enthusiasts, as it combined everyday drivability with genuine high-performance credentials. The exclusivity of the 1965 Chevelle Z16 with its limited production also gave the 396 a halo effect early in its life. Only a handful of buyers were lucky enough to own one, but the legend of the Z16 spread quickly, cementing the 396's reputation as a serious muscle car engine. By the following year, Chevrolet capitalized on this success by making the SS 396 Chevelle a mainstream production model, ensuring that the 396 became one of the defining engines of the muscle car era. In hindsight, the 1965 Chevrolet 396 Turbo Jet V8 wasn't just another big engine, it was a cornerstone of Chevrolet's golden age of performance. It set the stage for even more powerful versions of the Mark IV family, while giving Chevrolet the firepower it needed to compete head-to-head in the horsepower wars of the 1960s. Today, the 396 is remembered not only for its performance, but also for its historical significance as the engine that launched Chevrolet's big block dynasty. Number 7. 1965 Buick 401 Nailhead V8. By the mid-1960s, Buick was not the first name most enthusiasts thought of when the conversation turned to muscle cars. Known more for comfort, refinement, and understated elegance, Buick catered to a mature audience that valued smooth rides over smoky burnouts. But with the arrival of the muscle car era, even Buick could not resist the horsepower fever spreading across Detroit. The company's answer came in 1965 with the Skylark Grand Sport, powered by the storied 401 cubic-inch Nailhead V8. This engine, though rooted in an older design, proved that Buick could build a power plant capable of running with the best of them. The nickname Nailhead came from the engine's unusually small diameter valves, which were set vertically into the cylinder heads, resembling nails driven into a board. While this design was unconventional, it gave the engine a unique character. With smaller valves, the ports were narrower, resulting in high-velocity airflow that provided strong low-end torque. The 401 Nailhead was officially rated at 325 horsepower, but its real party trick was torque, an astonishing 445 pound-feet of it. This made the Grand Sport a formidable stoplight warrior, capable of unleashing neck-snapping acceleration without even trying. In the Skylark Grand Sport, the 401 was marketed as the Wildcat 445, a name derived from its torque rating rather than its displacement. This clever branding reflected Buick's emphasis on real-world muscle rather than inflated horsepower claims. On the street, the car delivered effortless thrust, often catching rivals off guard. While competitors like Pontiac's 389 GTO and Chevrolet's 396 relied on higher revving horsepower, Buick's approach was brute force torque, making the car quick in everyday driving without needing to wind the tachometer to its limits. Despite being older than some of its contemporary rivals, the Nailhead design had virtues that endeared it to enthusiasts. Its tall and narrow cylinder heads gave the engine a distinctive look, and its over-square design allowed it to rev higher than one might expect. Moreover, the engine was overbuilt and extremely durable, making it popular among hot rodders who appreciated its strength. Though its restrictive breathing limited its ultimate horsepower potential, in street applications, this hardly mattered. The torque-rich delivery made the cars feel fast and muscular in ways that spec sheets didn't fully capture. The Buick 401 Grand Sport also appealed to a slightly different kind of buyer. Where some muscle cars targeted young thrill seekers, Buick positioned the GS as a more refined alternative. It had performance, but it was also quiet, comfortable, and stylish. Buyers could enjoy blistering straight-line speed without sacrificing the smooth ride and upscale features that defined Buick's brand. This gave the Grand Sport a unique place in the muscle car hierarchy, a car that could please both enthusiasts and executives alike. Period tests confirmed that the 401 Nailhead was a legitimate performer. Quarter-mile times in the high 14-second range were common, putting it squarely in competition with other early muscle cars. More importantly, drivers praised its effortless acceleration and the sensation of endless pulling power. Unlike some peaky engines that demanded constant shifting, the 401 could surge forward in almost any gear, delivering a relaxed yet potent driving experience. By 1965, the 401 Nailhead had already been in production for several years, but in the Grand Sport, it gained new life as Buick's answer to the muscle car craze. Though later engines like the 400, 430, and 455 would replace it, the Nailhead was the engine that gave Buick credibility in the performance world. It proved that the brand could deliver serious muscle without abandoning its reputation for refinement. Today, the 401 Nailhead is remembered with respect by collectors and enthusiasts. It may not have achieved the legendary aura of the Hemi or Chevrolet's big blocks, but it carved its own niche as a torque monster with a distinctive personality. In the context of the golden era of muscle cars, the 1965 Buick 401 Nailhead V8 stands tall as a reminder that power comes in many forms, and sometimes the most unassuming designs can leave the deepest impressions. Number 6. 1964 Ford 427 FE V8. When Ford introduced the 427 FE V8 in 1964, it wasn't simply adding another engine to its lineup. It was firing a direct shot in the escalating horsepower wars of the era. The 427 was part of the FE series of big block V8s, a family that had already powered everything from Thunderbirds to Galaxies, but this version was purpose-built for performance. Developed primarily for racing, the 427 was designed with one mission in mind: to compete head-to-head with Chrysler's Hemi and Chevrolet's big blocks on both the street and the track. The 427 distinguished itself from other FE engines by using a strengthened block, cross-bolted main bearing caps, and higher flow cylinder heads. These features gave it the durability to handle high compression ratios, aggressive camshafts, and sustained high revolutions per minute punishment. In its high-riser configuration, which debuted in the Fairlane Thunderbolt factory drag car, the engine was conservatively rated at 425 horsepower at 6,000 revolutions per minute, though real output was higher. The Thunderbolt, a stripped-down Fairlane with fiberglass panels and minimal creature comforts, became a terror at the drag strip, cementing the 427's reputation as one of the fiercest engines of its time. On the street, Ford offered slightly tamer versions of the 427 in full-size Galaxies, and more famously, in Carroll Shelby's Cobras. In the lightweight Cobra chassis, the 427 turned the car into a fire-breathing monster, capable of staggering acceleration and top speeds that rivaled exotic European machines. The marriage of Ford's brutal big block power with Shelby's nimble British roadster created one of the most legendary performance cars of all time. It was proof that the 427 wasn't just about brute force, it was also adaptable and versatile, capable of powering a wide range of high-performance applications. The 427 FE also made its mark on the racing world, particularly in NASCAR. Ford's big blocks had been competitive before, but the 427 pushed the brand into true dominance on the high-banked ovals of Daytona and Talladega. The engine's rugged construction allowed Ford teams to run hard for 500 miles without fear of failure, and its ability to produce both horsepower and torque gave drivers the edge they needed. With drivers like Fred Lorenzen and Junior Johnson behind the wheel, the 427 brought Ford repeated victories, solidifying its reputation as a racing powerhouse. The 427's mystique only grew with the introduction of special variants. Ford experimented with medium riser and low riser configurations for different applications, tailoring the engine's breathing characteristics to specific needs. For drag racing, the high riser heads maximized airflow at high revolutions per minute, while in endurance racing, different intake setups improve reliability and drivability. In fact, the 427 powered Ford to multiple victories at Le Mans in the GT40, proving its capability not only in American oval and drag racing, but also on the world stage of endurance competition. For muscle car enthusiasts, the 427 in the Fairlane Thunderbolt remains one of the most iconic applications. Only about 100 Thunderbolts were produced, each one a barely street-legal factory drag racer. With fiberglass hoods, thin-gauge body panels, and stripped interiors, these cars were weapons designed to dominate NHRA Superstock competition. Period tests recorded quarter-mile times in the low 12-second range, astonishing numbers for a car available through dealerships in 1964. The character of the 427 was raw, aggressive, and uncompromising. At idle, it had a lumpy, intimidating lope, and under throttle, it roared with a ferocity few engines could match. It demanded respect and rewarded skilled drivers with blistering performance. While it was not the most practical engine for daily driving, those who experienced it firsthand knew they were at the wheel of something truly special. In hindsight, the 1964 Ford 427 FE V8 represented the height of Ford's big block engineering in the golden age of muscle cars. It was a racing engine made available to the public, a rare opportunity for ordinary buyers to experience the same technology that was conquering drag strips, stock car tracks, and endurance races around the world. Today, the 427 remains one of the most coveted engines among collectors, a symbol of an era when manufacturers pushed the limits of performance with fearless abandon. Number 5. 1963 Plymouth 426 Max Wedge V8. In 1963, Chrysler unleashed a weapon that would forever cement its reputation on the drag strip, the 426 Max Wedge. While the more famous 426 Hemi would arrive 2 years later, it was the Max Wedge that first showed just how serious Chrysler was about building engines specifically designed for competition. This was not a mild street performer dressed up with marketing flair. It was a purpose-built powerhouse that blurred the line between showroom floor and racetrack. The Max Wedge was essentially Chrysler's RB Series big block taken to its most extreme form. Originally introduced in 1962 at 413 cubic inches, the engine was enlarged to 426 cubic inches by 1963, providing more displacement and even greater performance potential. It was available in two flavors, the Stage 2nd and the later Stage 3rd versions, both engineered for maximum airflow and power at high revolutions per minute. With its aggressive camshaft profiles, oversized valves, and specially designed high-rise cross-ram intake manifold topped with twin 4-barrel carburetors, the Max Wedge was conservatively rated at 425 horsepower, though real-world output was often higher. The most distinctive feature of the Max Wedge was its intake system. Chrysler engineers developed a unique cross-ram design that placed the carburetors far apart, with long, tuned intake runners that crossed over each other before reaching the cylinder heads. This design dramatically increased the velocity of the incoming air-fuel mixture, producing phenomenal mid-range torque and top-end horsepower. The sight of a Max Wedge with its dual Carter carburetors perched atop that sprawling intake became an icon of early 60s drag racing. But the Max Wedge wasn't just an engineering marvel, it was a terror on the quarter mile. Chrysler stuffed the engine into lightweight Plymouth Savoys and Dodge Polaris, often with weight-saving measures like aluminum front body panels, thin glass, and stripped-down interiors. These cars were essentially factory drag racers, and in the hands of skilled drivers, they consistently ran quarter miles in the low 12-second range, making them nearly unbeatable in NHRA Superstock competition. For Chrysler, it was a masterstroke, giving ordinary buyers the chance to purchase a car that could dominate the strip straight from the dealership. On the street, however, the Max Wedge was a handful. The high compression ratios, often over 11:1, demanded premium fuel, and the lumpy camshaft made for a rough idle. In traffic, it could be temperamental, but once unleashed at full throttle, it revealed its true purpose: to deliver all-out performance. While not the most practical daily driver, the Max Wedge appealed directly to serious enthusiasts who valued raw speed above all else. The Max Wedge also paved the way for Chrysler's later successes. Its development directly influenced the design of the 426 Hemi, which would debut in 1964 for racing and in 1966 for street cars. Many of the lessons learned from the Max Wedge's airflow dynamics and durability carried over into the Hemi, making it a critical stepping stone in Chrysler's high-performance evolution. In many ways, the Max Wedge was the unsung hero, the engine that proved Chrysler could not only compete with Ford and GM, but surpass them in sheer racing performance. For enthusiasts and historians today, the Max Wedge holds a special place. It represents a time when automakers were willing to push the limits, selling cars that were essentially race-ready machines thinly disguised as street vehicles. Though production numbers were limited and many Max Wedges lived hard lives at the drag strip, surviving examples are treasured for their rarity and historical significance. Looking back, the 1963 Plymouth 426 Max Wedge wasn't just another big engine in a muscle car. It was a purpose-built tool for dominance, a factory-built hot rod that carried Chrysler into the thick of the horsepower wars. It may have been overshadowed by the legendary Hemi that followed, but without the Max Wedge, Chrysler's muscle car story would have been very different. Today, it stands as a testament to an era of fearless engineering and the relentless pursuit of speed. Number 4. 1963 Chevrolet 409 V8. In the early 1960s, before the arrival of the Mark IV big blocks, Chevrolet's 409 V8 was the engine that put the Bowtie brand on the muscle map. By 1963, the 409 had reached its peak, with a dual-quad version rated at 425 horsepower, making it one of the most powerful and iconic engines of the era. It wasn't just an engine, it was a cultural phenomenon, immortalized in song, feared on the drag strip, and cherished on the streets. The 409 had humble origins, evolving out of Chevrolet's W Series big block family, which began with the 348 introduced in 1958. Unlike later big blocks, the W Series engines had unique combustion chambers formed by the angle of the cylinder bores and the piston crowns, creating a distinctive wedge-shaped design. This unorthodox approach allowed the 409 to generate impressive torque and, in its most aggressive forms, astonishing horsepower. By 1963, Chevrolet engineers had fine-tuned the formula, pairing high-flow heads with dual-Carter AFB 4-barrel carburetors, a solid lifter camshaft, and a 10.5:1 compression ratio to achieve its 425 horsepower rating. The 409's legend was amplified by its association with Chevrolet's full-size cars, particularly the Impala. With the 409 under the hood, an Impala Supersport became a formidable street machine, capable of quarter-mile times in the low 14-second range. For a big, stylish, full-size car, this was shocking performance. Suddenly, Chevrolet had a car that could go head-to-head with Pontiacs, Mopars, and Fords, and it quickly became the weapon of choice for many drag racers. The 409 also achieved a special place in American pop culture thanks to the Beach Boys' hit song 409, released in 1962. The song celebrated the engine as the ultimate symbol of speed and youth rebellion, embedding it into the soundtrack of the muscle car era. Few other engines ever achieved such recognition outside the enthusiast community, and it elevated the 409 to legendary status almost overnight. To own a 409-equipped Impala was not just to have a fast car, but to be part of a cultural movement that defined an entire generation. On the drag strip, the 409 was a fierce competitor. Lightweight Bel Airs and Biscaynes, equipped with the dual-quad 409s, became dominant in superstock classes, earning reputations as giant killers. Racers loved the engine's broad torque curve, which made launching hard off the line easier, and its willingness to rev, which allowed it to hold its own against Chrysler Max Wedges and Ford 406s. Even though it was eventually surpassed by newer engines, for a brief window, the 409 was the king of Chevrolet performance. However, the 409 was not without its limitations. Its combustion chamber design, while unique, ultimately restricted airflow compared to the newer Mark IV architecture that Chevrolet would introduce with the 396 in 1965. This meant the 409 had a relatively short reign at the top before being phased out in favor of more advanced big blocks. But for enthusiasts, the 409's charm lay not in its longevity, but in the raw, unrefined muscle it represented at a critical turning point in the horsepower wars. For collectors today, a genuine 409 car is one of the most prized Chevrolets of the 1960s. They represent not just speed and engineering prowess, but a slice of Americana, the fusion of Detroit iron, rock and roll, and drag racing culture. The sound of a solid lifter, 409 winding out through dual quads, remains one of the most evocative mechanical symphonies of the muscle car era. Looking back, the 1963 Chevrolet 409 V8 stands as more than an engine. It was a symbol. It was the car that teenagers dreamed about, the motor that won trophies on Saturday nights, and the machine that gave Chevrolet the performance credibility it needed before the next generation of big blocks took over. For a brief but brilliant moment, the 409 was America's sweetheart, a legend that defined the excitement and freedom of the muscle car's golden age. Number 3. 1962 Pontiac 421 Super Duty V8. In the early 1960s, Pontiac was quickly transforming itself from a conservative brand into a performance powerhouse. Central to this transformation was the introduction of the 421 Super Duty V8 in 1962, an engine that pushed Pontiac to the forefront of drag racing and helped lay the foundation for the muscle car boom that followed. Unlike many of its contemporaries, the 421 Super Duty wasn't designed as a mass-market performance option. It was a specialized, limited production weapon built specifically for competition. The 421 Super Duty was based on Pontiac's large displacement V8 family, but it was far more than a bored-out street engine. Engineers fitted it with forged steel crankshafts, heavy-duty connecting rods, high-compression pistons, and a race-spec camshaft. Buyers could choose between single or dual 4-barrel carburetors, with the most aggressive setup producing an advertised 405 horsepower. In reality, output was likely even higher, especially in the dual-quad configuration, which was optimized for drag strip performance. Pontiac made the 421 Super Duty available in full-size cars like the Catalina, Grand Prix, and Bonneville, which may have seemed unlikely platforms for serious drag racing. But with lightweighting tricks like aluminum body panels, thin glass, and stripped interiors, these seemingly large family cars became formidable competition machines. On the drag strip, they were capable of low 13-second quarter-mile times, astonishing for cars of their size and weight in 1962. The Super Duty cars were produced in very limited numbers, fewer than 200 in total, which only enhanced their mystique. Pontiac made sure they went into the hands of serious racers, who quickly turned them into legends. Drivers like Arnie, the Farmer, Beswick, and Mickey Thompson campaigned 421 Super Duty Pontiacs, giving the brand national exposure and proving that Pontiac could stand toe-to-toe with Chrysler's Max Wedge cars and Chevrolet's 409s. These cars weren't just competitive, they were dominant, and they transformed Pontiac's image almost overnight. The 421 Super Duty was also significant because it highlighted Pontiac's willingness to bend the rules in pursuit of performance. At a time when General Motors officially discouraged its divisions from participating directly in racing, Pontiac worked behind the scenes to funnel high-performance parts and engines into the hands of privateers. The 421 Super Duty was the ultimate expression of this strategy, a factory-built race engine thinly disguised as a street option. It gave enthusiasts the chance to buy a car straight off the lot that could compete on Sunday and cruise on Monday. What made the 421 particularly fearsome was its blend of brute force and durability. Its forged internals meant it could withstand the punishment of high revolutions per minute racing, while its large displacement gave it the torque needed to launch heavy, full-size cars off the line with authority. Even compared to its rivals, the 421 delivered a broad, flexible power band that made it both competitive on the strip and thrilling on the street. By 1963, the 421 Super Duty had cemented Pontiac's reputation as a leader in performance. Though GM's corporate racing ban curtailed official factory support after that year, the Super Duty cars had already made their mark. They showed the world that Pontiac was no longer just a builder of conservative family sedans, but a true player in the horsepower wars. The momentum from the Super Duty program carried directly into the development of the GTO, which would debut in 1964 and ignite the muscle car revolution. Today, the 1962 Pontiac 421 Super Duty V8 is remembered as one of the rarest and most desirable muscle car engines of its era. Surviving examples of these cars are highly sought after, not just for their scarcity, but for the pivotal role they played in reshaping Pontiac's image. They represent the moment when Pontiac went from a staid GM division to an innovator and leader in the performance world. For enthusiasts and historians alike, the 421 Super Duty stands as proof of how one bold engine program could alter the course of an entire brand and help define the golden age of muscle cars. Number 2. 1966 Chrysler 426 Street Hemi V8. Few engines in automotive history carry the same aura as Chrysler's 426 Hemi. By the time it reached the streets in 1966, the Elephant engine, as it was nicknamed, had already carved its reputation on the high banks of NASCAR and the quarter-mile strips across America. Initially introduced in 1964 as a race-only motor, the Hemi quickly dominated stock car racing until NASCAR required manufacturers to sell production versions to the public. Chrysler obliged, and thus the 426 Street Hemi was born, a racing engine offered in showroom cars, something virtually unheard of in its day. The heart of the Hemi's legend lay in its hemispherical combustion chambers. Unlike wedge-shaped heads that dominated Detroit at the time, the Hemi's round chambers and massive valves allowed for superior airflow, higher compression ratios, and more complete combustion. The result was a 425 horsepower rating at 5,000 revolutions per minute, though the true output was closer to 475 or even 500 horsepower in stock form. With over 490 pound-feet of torque on tap, the Street Hemi was a sledgehammer of an engine, more at home at wide-open throttle than cruising down Main Street. When Chrysler offered the Hemi in production models beginning in 1966, it was available in cars like the Dodge Charger, Dodge Coronet, and Plymouth Belvedere. Later, it would find its way into icons such as the Roadrunner, GTX, and Barracuda. Buyers who checked the Hemi option box weren't just buying a car, they were purchasing a near race-ready engine with a factory warranty. Though expensive and somewhat temperamental for daily use, the Hemi quickly established itself as the ultimate bragging rights motor of the muscle car age. On the drag strip, the Hemi was nearly unbeatable. NHRA Superstock classes in the late 1960s became a showcase for Hemi dominance, with factory-supported teams and privateers alike wringing astonishing performance out of their cars. The engine's strength and breathing ability made it ideal for high revolutions per minute runs, and with slicks and proper tuning, Hemi-powered Mopars consistently turned quarter-mile times in the low 12-second range or better. Chrysler's decision to sell the Hemi to the public blurred the line between professional racing and everyday motoring in a way no other manufacturer dared. Despite its racing pedigree, the Street Hemi was remarkably well-engineered for production use. It featured dual 4-barrel Carter AFB carburetors, a solid lifter camshaft, heavy-duty internals, and reinforced block construction. This meant that while it was docile enough to idle in traffic, it could instantly transform into a ferocious beast with just a press of the throttle. It was in many ways the perfect representation of the muscle car ethos, massive performance wrapped in a relatively affordable, mass-produced package. However, the Hemi was not for everyone. Its cost was high, its thirst for fuel considerable, and insurance premiums skyrocketed for those who owned one. As a result, relatively few Street Hemis were sold compared to more affordable big blocks like the 383 or the 440 Magnum. But this scarcity only enhanced its mystique. To pull up next to a Hemi-powered car in 1966 was to know you were facing one of the baddest machines on the road. The legacy of the 426 Street Hemi goes far beyond numbers on a spec sheet. It became a cultural icon, a symbol of Detroit's unrestrained engineering might during the golden era of horsepower. Even decades later, the phrase Hemi-powered resonates with enthusiasts and casual fans alike. Its combination of technical sophistication, raw output, and racing pedigree elevated it beyond just another big block. It became a legend in its own lifetime. Looking back, the 1966 Chrysler 426 Street Hemi V8 wasn't merely an engine option, it was a statement. It proved that Chrysler was willing to build uncompromising, world-beating performance machines and sell them to the public. Though it was expensive, impractical for some, and relatively rare, the Street Hemi defined the pinnacle of muscle car performance. Today, it remains one of the most celebrated and collectible engines of all time. A reminder of a glorious moment when Detroit put racing technology directly into the hands of ordinary drivers. Number 1. 1965 Pontiac 389 Tri-Power V8. If there is a single engine that can be credited with sparking the muscle car revolution, it is Pontiac's 389 Tri-Power V8. By 1965, Pontiac had already been experimenting with performance, but the GTO, powered by the 389 with its triple two-barrel carburetors, was the car that ignited an entirely new market segment. This was the engine that broke the rules, bent corporate policy, and set the stage for an arms race of horsepower that defined the golden era. The 389 itself had been in Pontiac's lineup since the late 1950s, but in the GTO, it found its most iconic application. The engine displaced 389 cubic inches and was offered in multiple states of tune, but the crown jewel was the tri-power setup. This arrangement used 3 Rochester two-barrel carburetors, with the center carb handling everyday driving and the outer 2 kicking in under heavy throttle. The result was a seamless blend of drivability and explosive performance. Officially rated at 360 horsepower in 1965, the tri-power 389 had a reputation for producing much more in the real world. Pontiac's decision to pair the 389 with the midsize Tempest body in the form of the GTO was nothing short of revolutionary. General Motors had an internal policy that restricted intermediate cars to engines no larger than 330 cubic inches. But Pontiac engineers, led by John DeLorean, Jim Wangers, and Bill Collins, found a way around this restriction by making the GTO package an option rather than a standalone model. The result was a lighter, mid-size car with a full-size car's V8 power, a combination that redefined performance for a generation. On the street, the tri-power 389 gave the GTO a unique character. Around town, it was docile enough to be driven daily, running on the center carburetor alone. But when a driver floored the accelerator, the outer carbs opened, unleashing a roar that enthusiasts still describe as intoxicating. Suddenly, the GTO leapt forward with a surge of torque and horsepower that could put full-size Pontiacs, Chevrolets, and even Mopars in the rearview mirror. For young drivers in 1965, few thrills compared to hearing those 3 carbs open up in unison. The tri-power 389 wasn't just about raw speed, it was about image. Pontiac's clever marketing and its decision to challenge GM's conservative policies made the GTO the car everyone wanted. Magazine tests of the day consistently praised its performance, with quarter-mile times dipping into the low 14-second range. In fact, the GTO quickly earned the nickname the GOAT, a moniker of respect from enthusiasts who recognized it as a street predator. For Pontiac, the success of the tri-power 389 proved that there was a massive appetite for affordable, factory-built performance cars. Within months, every other GM division, and soon Ford, Chrysler, and AMC, were racing to offer their own versions of the muscle car formula. But Pontiac had the distinction of being the first to break through, and it owed that success largely to the 389 tri-power. Even within Pontiac's lineup, the tri-power 389 stood out as a high-water mark. Later engines, like the 400 and 421, would build on its legacy, but none carried the same cultural impact. The sound of 3 carburetors sucking in air at full throttle became the soundtrack of the mid-60s, a mechanical symphony that announced the arrival of the muscle car era. It wasn't just about performance, it was about attitude, and the 389 tri-power delivered it in spades. Looking back, the 1965 Pontiac 389 tri-power V8 represents the true genesis of the muscle car movement. It was fast, stylish, rebellious, and affordable, capturing the spirit of a youth-driven market that craved speed and individuality. More than just an engine, it was the spark that lit a fire across Detroit, a fire that would burn brightly for the remainder of the 1960s. Today, collectors and enthusiasts revere the tri-power GTO as the ultimate symbol of that pivotal moment when the muscle car era began.